Good morning, brothers and sisters. I thought today's video would be an extrapolation on all the information that I've shared with you over the last 30 videos. So I'm just going to touch on elements, whatever the Spirit brings to mind for me to touch on. And one of the things was, in the last video, when I spoke of the Antichrist walking into the temple, which represents the body, and then declaring himself as God, okay? And we've spoke of how the first Adam made a covenant with the Holy Spirit. And so there could be some confusion in what I was actually saying, okay? Because I tend to depend a lot on you understanding other passages and you able to put them together. And so this is really for those who maybe couldn't understand why I said what I said. So it says in many parts, okay, that the snare that they have laid for us, and when I say us, I am referring to the daughters of Zion, that the snare, that the trap that they have laid for these daughters of Zion to fall into, that they literally fall into it themselves, okay? So we have to hold that key piece of information in our minds when we're thinking of the Antichrist marching into this temple and exalting himself as God, okay? Even though he made a covenant with the Holy Spirit, okay? Which she promised him that under the law, I'll build you up so that you become the only God on earth. He. All right? And that's a covenant with the old, that's the old covenant actually. And we're going to get into that a little bit. But what the other part of that we need to understand about the snare that they laid for these daughters of Zion, which you'll read all about in the Old Testament. You'll hit on it and hit on it and hit on it. That they fall into it for themselves. And then when we couple that with the fact that in the New Testament, they cast off the whore. They burn her. They burn her flesh. They cast her off, right? Well, then you go to Isaiah 46, and we did a study on that, woman's mantle, and the burden being actually represented as the children when you begin to understand who births children, and then we're looking at the reborn spirit, that then you're looking at these men who thinks that they can birth themselves, that they need no spirit to do anything for them. And so they cast off a covenant with the Holy Spirit because they fell into the snare that they can deliver themselves and that they are indeed gods. You see? So they fall into this trap. But you also have to understand, he's still got that Holy Spirit inside of him when he walks in to that temple which represents the body. All right? So you're drawing your correlations in that way. At least that's what my intention was. I didn't draw it out very well. I didn't extrapolate the information very well for you. So that's the angle that I was looking at. They fall into this themselves. They have actually fallen into this snare. All mankind has. They believe that the image of God is male, he. And that makes them superior to you as a she. They all believe this. I don't care what any of them says. When you look at the Jewish men who go to the weeping wall, and this is part of their prayer for anybody who don't know it, they say, thank you, God, that I wasn't born a woman. Well, what is that if that isn't arrogance and thinking you're superior? And the men on the pulpits over here do the same thing every time they point at Eve. It's a tickling of their ears. It makes them feel superior to us. But once you begin to really understand this theology that the Spirit has shown me and then has told me to present it, and I'll share something with you before I bring this up, and I'll keep this in front of me as a reminder of this is what I want to talk on, at least some of it. That I said to her, why isn't anybody picking up this theology and actually studying it and running it out to understand that it is the truth? I said, why is nobody? And when I say nobody, I understand. I do have a few out there. And if you've picked this up, may the Lord bless you, because again, it does require work. It's not easy to go in and to retrieve these passages and to really get down on your knees and say, Spirit, do I do this? Holy Spirit, do I do this? How do I look at this? And that she's gonna show it, and we proved it to you how she is a she. But I said to her, I said, how come they're not picking it up? You know? And but everything in its appointed time. But she took me to the word 917. Yeah, it was Greek. 917, I believe that she took me to. I have, okay. Just a second, I'll get to it. I think. Okay. So she took me to 917, and this is what she said to me. This is what I heard in the Spirit. She said, because they have a heavy year, is what she said. See, where I looked it up was online. It was better. But it was from the same as 922, which was weighty, burdensome, grave, grievous, heavy. And it also had the idea of oppression and violence, the derivatives of this word. And so she said to me, she said, they have a heavy ear, number one, which also intended to mean lazy. They didn't really think they have a right to go in and maybe study it in the angle that I'm given, number one. Maybe that's part of it. Because it does require a lot of time to do this. And I was a little bit disheartened, and she said, but understand, she said, you were just like them. She told me this. She said, you were just like them. This did not come easy for you, she said. It took me, and that's the Spirit that was talking to me, 6 or 7 years to get you to the point where you are. And for you just to plop it in their lap, it's not going to be easy to hear. They're going to have a heavy ear. Expect them to have a heavy ear. You had it. I had it in the beginning. I was where you are. I know, because I lived it since I was 11 years old. I lived this. I love the Lord Jesus, and I still do. I just know who He is now. Better than I ever could have dreamt. And but she said, don't be angry with them, because she said they're carrying a heavy burden on them. And that burden is law, which carries oppression with it. Heavy oppression. They're heavily oppressed. And she said that came by way of violence over thousands of years to put this in play. So she said, don't hold it against them. So forgive me for having sometimes an edge to me. That's not my intention. But I certainly am passionate about what the Spirit has shown me. So what I wanted to talk about today a little bit was, like I said, all the things that we've been talking about. And so if we go to Psalm 52, let's just look at Psalm 52. Okay. Let's read it. Okay, Psalm 52, verse 1. Why boastest thou self in mischief, O mighty man? The goodness of God endureth continually. Thy tongue devises mischief, like a sharp razor working deceitfully. Thou lovest evil more than good, and lying rather than to speak righteousness. Verse 4. Thou lovest all devouring words, O thou deceitful tongue. Verse 5. God shall likewise destroy thee forever. She shall take thee away, and pluck thee out of thy dwelling place, and root thee out of the land of the living. Verse 6. The righteous also shall see and fear, and shall laugh at him. Verse 7. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength. Who do you suppose is in view in that verse? Well, if we go up to our heading, and in my Bible it says God's judgment and grace, but then it says, to the chief musician Maskil, a psalm of David, when Doeg, now Doeg means Edom, and what you come to understand about the words Edom, Edomite, Idumea, that it's really another way of saying Adam, really. They derive from Adam, A-D-O-M, and Adam is your derivatives on this Doeg, the word Doeg. So when Adam, the Edomite, the Adamite, came and told Saul and said unto him, David is come to the house of Ahimelech. Now, we're going to reach back further through time, because this gets hammered at you in many different ways of what went down in the garden. That's how the Lord teaches us, shows it to us in many different ways. All right? And hopefully, she hopes that her children will actually understand her teachings. And so, what does it say? Lo, this is the man, that was Adam, who rejected a covenant with the righteous spirit represented by Eve, that he sets out and receives a covenant with the whore spirit, who, what does it say in Proverbs 9? Her steps leads down to the gates of Sheol. Then you have two women in view as your two covenants representing your two spirits in Galatians 4. All right. Lo, this is the man that made not God his strength. The woman is given in covenant representing the spirit with the laws of heaven, and he rejected this. But trusted in the abundance of his riches. She promised him riches. She promised to make him rich. And strengthen himself in his wickedness, which came to be under the law, which we view as old covenant. Well, it is in a sense, but it's old covenant with the whore spirit. Old Testament law is not a covenant with God. It was a covenant with the whore spirit. And we're going to look at that in a minute. Verse 8, but I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the mercy of God forever and ever. This was the righteous spirit represented by Eve, the woman. 9, I will praise thee forever because thou hast done it, and I will wait on thy name, for it is good before thy saints. Okay. Now, we get that, right? Once we understand who Adam really was, which was the one who chose covenant with the whore spirit. We understand that the she-goat is literally the righteous spirit, represented by the woman Eve, who was set out of the Adam. She was set out. He did not want a covenant with her, and he renames her, what? Mother of all living, not mother of death, because that's who he had a covenant with, the whore spirit. And where does her steps lead? Down to the gates of Sheol. Proverbs 9 tells us this. And it's two women that's in view there. They try not to make it all about women. They just want the whore about the woman. The righteous spirit's about righteous daughters rejected. Adam rejected a covenant with her. He didn't want nothing to do. Why do you think Christ had to come and die on the cross? He becomes our new mantle, our new covering, our new body. So that's part of what we wanted to talk about. But in 55, I had spoke of how she speaks to him. And she says, I had said in the last video that it was like she was caught off guard, all right? And she didn't know how to even respond hardly to what he said. She remained silent is the idea. So it was in, I believe it was in 55. Maybe I got the wrong chapter again. Just 1 second here. Because we want to get this right. Okay, maybe I didn't write it down. Okay, so we have quite a few things we want to go over. Okay, so let's go into 55. 55 is really all about the dove, the Azazel goat, and the spirit of Eve. That's what this is about. But she says this. Where is the verse? Well, where is it? I just read it this morning. Okay, forgive me. I hate these pauses. No, it was 55. I'm so forgetful. No, it's 50. It was 50, yeah. Right. So, okay, it says it in verse. Okay, so we'll start in verse. Okay, we'll start at verse 16 of Psalm 50, okay? It says this, "But unto the wicked God saith, What hast thou to do, to declare my statutes, or that thou shouldest take my covenant in thy mouth?" So God here is actually addressing fallen Adam and that horse spirit, saying, you have no right now to take my law in your mouth. You have no right to it. All right? Verse 17, "Seeing thou hatest instruction and castest my words behind thee." He cast off Eve, representing the righteous spirit, which was given in covenant. We're showing that in Isaiah 59, that the spirit is given to man in covenant with the words of heaven, with the law of heaven. Well, he cast her off. He didn't want nothing to do with that. And he makes a covenant with that horse spirit who promised to exalt him as God in the earth, which you're going to find as the Baal image. All right? Verse 18, "But when thou sawest a thief, then thou consentest with her," or with him, "and has been partaker with adulterers." So here it looks like it's the horse spirit that's in view. She made a covenant with him, the horse spirit, and was a partaker with an adulterer. Verse 19, "Thou givest thy mouth to evil, and thy tongue frameth deceit." Where was deceit first found in? The horse spirit. Right? Verse 20, "Thou sittest and speakest against thy sister," not thy brother. They accused Eve in the courts of heaven. They accused her. The pair of them together was in covenant together. Fallen Adam and the horse spirit. And they accused her. And they blame her for it all. And that's where it ends up, on the head of the Azazel goat. So, "Thou sittest and speakest against thy sister. Thou slanderest thine own mother's daughter." Not son, it's his son. Verse 21, "These things hast thou done, and I kept silent." This is the righteous spirit speaking. She says here, she said, "You said all of these things about me, and I remained silent." She didn't address the guilt at this time. So verse 21 again, "These things hast thou done, and I kept silent." Silence. "Thou thoughtest that I was altogether such as one as thyself." You thought I was just like you. And men tend to look at all of us women and go, "You're all Eves." No. We're not all Eves. There's a small fragment of us who are like the spirit that dwelt in Eve, and not that horse spirit. But they paint you all with this brush of, you're all wicked, you're all deceivers, we can't trust anything out of any of your mouth because us men, look, she was deceived, not Adam. No, you're right, she was deceived, but she was deceived by the man that she trusted, her husband, Adam. And he turned on her, and he wasn't deceived. Not according to the scriptures. He knew what he was doing when he went after that horror spirit and said, "I'll make a covenant with you." And that's what gets exalted in the temple in the end of days. This is the old covenant that he made with that horror spirit that he's trying to put in play again, which has always been in play. But she says, "Thou thoughtest that I was just like you. But I will reprove thee." We're in the courts of heaven now, proving our case. "And I will set them in order before thine eyes." I'll set it the way it was always the truth. I'll set the truth. I'll put the truth in play. And you're going to be reproved for what you did to the righteous daughters, the daughters of Zion. 22, "Now consider this, ye that forget God, lest I tear you in pieces, and there be none to deliver you." That's those lionesses that's hid amongst the Gentiles that's going to awaken. Verse 23, whosoever offereth praise glorifieth me, and to him or her that ordereth his conversation aright will I show the salvation of God. All right. Now, that's what's going on. We're in the court of heaven right now, and we're proving our case. We're setting everything in order. Now, the other thing I wanted to share, and there's so many things I wanted to share, but you know, I say this a lot, but the best thing is to really go in and to watch the videos thoroughly. Don't skip through parts, because then things are going to get took out of context, right? Things are going to be said that you're going to miss, and then you're going to misconstrue them. And I know that you can do this because I've done it myself, and I've had to go back and rewatch videos and go, oh, that's what they were saying, because you can twist things by removing just a small fragment out. But really the best way to do it is to understand how this covenant got made, which was with the Holy Spirit and Adam, who chose a covenant with her. And that is the covenant that gets put in play by the Antichrist, which is designed to subjugate women, to build him up as a god under the law. Now, the covenant that God actually had with the nation of Israel, we find here. Watch what it says. We're going to go to Jeremiah. Actually, I was going to go here first, but I think I will do this first. We'll go to Jeremiah chapter, I believe it's 31. And we'll look at this. Okay, and we'll see what really took place, okay? So verse 31 of Jeremiah 31, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Now, you've got two houses in view there. And when you watch my videos, you begin to realize how Judah represents the male, that would be Christ, and Israel represents the female, the feminine half of the Godhead. This is the new covenant established between male and female. Now, Israel, the feminine half, is represented and called daughter Zion in the scriptures, okay? So she says, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, male and female, which is the covenant that we see presented to us in Genesis with the creation of male and female, body and spirit, all right? And Adam rejected Eve. Her name wasn't Eve. They were called one, all right? And this is what we miss in the context. Adam was one. He was called Adam. She was called Adam. And he decides he don't want a covenant with her. And he breaks that covenant with the righteous spirit when he sets her out. It's symbolized by him setting her out and calling her Eve. And this is what Israel represented, being set apart from all the other nations. And it represented the woman's seed, the righteous spirit seed. But we're told here what they did. They were no different when it was all said and done. The men, that was to represent the lineage of the sons of the new covenant. They did the same thing as the first Adam. Watch what they did. Verse 32. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break. So they broke the covenant. Right? So she is remaking this covenant that was broken by Adam. Although it says, I was a husband. No, God was not a husband. Never a husband. Fallen law built man up as your Baal image. And that word there for your husband is 1166. All right? Mother is the spirit given in covenant. All right? And man broke his covenant with her, with the righteous spirit, by breaking a covenant with her daughter. Now, when you look at the creation account, woman is the last thing created, because she represents the glory that sits on top. Men go, oh, man was the last thing created, and then she came under him. No, it was a stacking order. The glory was last. All right? She's the glory. representing the spirit given in covenant to the man. She's not under him. She's the glory, the spirit, with the words of heaven that he rejected. All right? Now, so they break that covenant. So what's the new covenant? We're told what it looks like in verse 33. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts, not on pages, written by the hand of men, but in their inward parts that God keeps alive through the Spirit that indwells us. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. So we're talking about the Spirit again here, being put back in a rightful place. That's what we're talking about. Verse 34, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sins no more. All right? So, what we understand is the law that the Antichrist is actually hanging on to like honey in his mouth, and it's cobra's venom in his gut, was given to him by the Holy Spirit that he was in covenant with after he rejected a covenant with the righteous spirit, represented by the woman Eve, who they accuse, which then is symbolized by the Azazel goat. Okay? Now we begin to understand these two goats. You got a male and a female, not two males. They made it two males. That's what your Baal image will do for you. Cut you right out of the picture. And so all the sins of Israel is placed on the head of the Azazel goat, and she's let go to roam to and fro in a land not inhabited. And the land not inhabited is the body. She was cast out of the body. She wasn't allowed to inhabit it. But she could work through the body. She could still find men and women to work through who would receive her. Okay? So it was the spirit that had to work out of the body. But when you received her, she could, I think, come into the body. So Psalm 53:6 says this. Oh, that the salvation of Israel were come out of Zion. Now, we've been talking about who Zion is, okay? And Zion in view here, they want to make you believe it's multiples, it's a whole bunch of people, it's a city. And while, yes, it does represent that because it's actually representing territories and the daughters that govern these territories. But she's also a daughter, singular, all right? And that's what you come to understand, all right? Because it is the covenant remade. And when you get your example of your covenant, you're going to get it in the beginning, between a male and a female, body and a spirit. And they try to dismiss the feminine because he's trying to continue to keep himself exalted. In the temple, in the body, is God. And that's what we're looking at, the reestablishment of this old covenant, which really comes into play heavy to suppress women, righteous daughters. It says he has no respect of women, none. So then he struts into that temple and declares himself as God. He's fallen into his own trap, his own snare, wherein there's nothing but death that waits for him. When God bringeth back the captivity of her people, Israel shall rejoice and Israel shall be glad. I found a correlation to that verse in Daniel 12:1. I found it strongly correlated. So it says, Oh, that the salvation of Israel come out of Zion. When God bringeth back the captivity of her people, Israel shall rejoice and Israel shall be glad. So what does Daniel 12:1 say? Well, we know this quite well because it's speaking about Michael, which is not a he. It is the Spirit standing up for Israel. That's what it is. And when you examine Sarah's name, her name derives from chief. Your principle. Your spirit is your principle. Your first fruits. What governs the body with the law. So what does it actually say in Daniel 12? It says, And at that time shall daughter Zion, not Michael. It is not Michael that stands up, a male. That's an abomination. We discussed that in the last video. At that time shall the daughter Zion stand up, the great chief principal, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation. Now you're talking about spiritual Israel standing up now. That's what you're talking about here. And spiritual Israel actually stands up for physical Israel. All right? That's your overview. And then we understand who physical Israel is, because we discussed it in our overview of Isaiah 49. And it's these daughters who are cast out in the fields of the Gentiles, known as the daughters of Zion, who then enlarge their birthright by picking up the Gentiles as they go, because you claim your heritage to the Israelites through the woman's side. And we discussed where those 10 tribes were found out in the fields of the Gentiles, which are not part of the church, which is spiritual Israel. Right? I know it seems convoluted, and maybe it is when I go watch this. So there was a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered. That's on these daughters to do it. Delivery of the burden of the children. It's the mother that does this. It is not no man that can do this. A man cannot deliver the burden. And we talked about death stranding. Look at the pictures they got. They got umbilical cords coming from men's abdomen with children attached to them. They're trying to deliver themselves and they can't. It's not on them to do it. They can't do it. This is women that do this. This is the Spirit that does it. She delivers the children. She rebirths the children. So shall be delivered. So these are the daughters of Zion that stands up. Everyone that shall be found written in the book of life. Verse 2, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Verse 3, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book even to the same, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, that's the Spirit, and knowledge shall be increased. All right. And we have other passages that seems to line up with that. Let's go. Let's see if we can find them. Let's see what it says. I don't know that I'm going to read this. I'm just going to look at it right now. Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's just, for many are called, but few are chosen. And you're going to find that in Romans 11. If the casting away of them, what shall the receiving of them be, right? And, you know, we've discussed in so many passages how these daughters of Zion were cast off. And then we realized in the very beginning how the genders got shifted around, how they denied the Spirit her rightful place and went to a he, because they were looking to exalt men as gods in the earth. That's what the whore spirit promised. That's how she got exalted in the midst of the body, the second heavens. And Christ says, whatsoever you bind on earth, you will bind in the heavens. Whatsoever you release in the earth, you release in the heavens. So he's saying, release my Spirit in the earth. Release her. And at the 3.5 year mark, you see her rise up. She casts that whore spirit to the earth, which seems to be a symbol of men actually attempting to cast her off and burn her. They reject her. And then he walks into the temple and exalts himself as a god. I know it's probably a little bit confusing, but once you go in and you pick up what I'm saying, and you really go to the Spirit, you really need to go to the Spirit, and the Spirit will show these things. But, you know, we've pointed to many passages that proves that these daughters were cast down. And we put it all together in 4 or 5 passages that you really need to go and allow the Spirit to show it to you. But if you go to Micah 2, Ezekiel 13, you go to that verse in Job 31, verse 33, You go to 1 Kings chapter 11. I believe it's 1 Kings. I don't think it's 2 Kings. And Jeremiah, what was it? Jeremiah 9. If you read these passages and you put the feminine where she belongs in her rightful place, you begin to understand that it's telling you exactly what the key of David is. And it's telling you that the key of David is these righteous daughters of Zion that were cast off by the men, who were in covenant with the whore spirits, okay, which came out of the surrounding nations that represented the Gentiles, which represented fallen Adam and the whore spirit seed, who they wanted to put in play. These daughters, these fallen daughters, these whore spirit daughters, wanted to put them in power on Mount Zion, which means exalting the whore spirit, right? And they did that in the nation of Israel because that's where God chose, because it was Eve's seed. And so they needed to take out the righteous daughters. So we're shown Solomon. So you have the key of Solomon, which is in total opposition to the key of David. And he's shown daubing up this wall. And it says the breaches in the wall of David were many. Well, the breaches in the wall of David that they're talking about there are the gates of the daughters of Zion, that these daughters of Israel who had a birthright on Mount Zion as these daughters that governed Israel. And what does Solomon do? He's shown daubing these up. David left them open because they were his key, right? They're what causes the body to live. And that's called the key of David, these daughters of Zion. Now Solomon daubs it up because he took wives from the surrounding nations and he puts them on Mount Zion, which then they begin to make laws, which makes him king and God over everything. You see, that's the covenant, right? But in the end, Christ says, whatsoever you bind on earth, you bind in heaven. But whatsoever you release in the earth, you release in heaven. Release my daughter Zion. And you see at the 3.5-year mark, she rises up, she kicks Lucifer, the whore spirit, exalted, out of the second heaven, because Adam has marched into the temple and says, I'm God. And he's kicked off the whore spirit. That's the symbol of it all. But you know, it's just a process. It's a progression. You know, because if you watch men with a whore spirit or a whore, after a while he gets so he absolutely hates her. And he begins to think, well, she really is to blame for everything. She really is inferior to me, and she don't deserve me. Well, guess where that leads to? But that's what the whore spirit teaches men to do, right? It eventually leads to a deep-seated hatred against womankind and blames her, and then he falls into this idea that he's God and nobody can take him down, right? And we're talking about the wicked sons here. We're not talking about the righteous sons. We're talking about the wicked sons who do this, who really do believe that they're the be-all, end-all of everything. But Christ didn't do that. He came and he claimed back the key of David. He becomes the mantle for these daughters, okay? So, and it's the covenant restored, remade, but it's remade better and grander. Because after the casting off of those daughters of Zion, it put them out in the fields of the Gentiles. And so because the lineage of Israel was claimed through these daughters that were cast off out into the fields of the Gentiles, she continues to be Israelite, but she begins to pick up the Gentiles as she goes, this expanding of her birthright, which we've discussed in Isaiah, which was a discussion that took in Isaiah 49. Okay, so Solomon daubed the wall. He put the whore spirit in play. All right. And so we're going to look at a few other passages just because we have time to do that. So Psalm 57 verse 8 says it, but I also wanted to read 11. It says, what then? Israel hath not obtained that which she seeketh for? She didn't manage to do what she needed to do, or what she sought for, which was full restoration of her back to her rightful place. This is found in Romans 11. So what then? Israel hath not obtained that which she seeketh for, but the election has obtained it, those that were divinely selected from the very beginning, which were the daughters of Zion. and the rest were blinded. So hitting another reason why many can't see this particular doctrine as truth. Perhaps because you are blinded. It's a spiritual blinding. But what does it say in verse 8? It says, according as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear, and to this day. So it's talking about the previous comment, and the rest were blinded. That's what it's talking about. But what does it say in verse 15? It says, for if the casting away of them, and we saw that being promised by Mother Yahweh in Psalms 106, that if the sons did not want to receive these righteous daughters in covenant, she had set this little nation apart because they represented the woman's seed. But if the men were going to cast off a covenant with these righteous daughters of Zion, that she would indeed cast them out into the fields of the Gentiles. Because she says, fine, if you want to be no different than the Gentile nations, and you want to bow down to a false god and image, that was Baal, right? Then she said, then you will not claim them. You know, I'll take them away from you and I'll cast them out into the fields of the Gentiles. That's what she does in Psalms 106. She's showing us that. But this is where it says it too, in Romans 11, verse 15. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world. This is how the Gentiles were grafted in. Through the rejected daughters of Zion, which were Israelite women. And you claim your heritage through the woman's side in Israel. What shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? So in order for the body to live, the body must receive the key of David, which is the daughters of Zion, which Christ come to claim. He becomes the new temple, the new mantle, right? You know, those 30 pieces of silver that daughter Zion, after she broke her staff, and the covenant representing her territory with Israel, her inheritance of Israel. She breaks both of these staffs in Zechariah 11. And then Mother tells her, the Creator tells her, cast what they gave you for the cost of your mantle to the potter's field. And the promise was found in Isaiah 49. I'll remake it. I'll remake it grander. And that mantle came in the form of Christ. He was the greater mantle. But because the daughter of Zion had been cast off into the fields of the Gentiles, her birthright expanded. And she not only gets to claim Israel, she gets to claim the Gentiles now. And she claims it with the new mantle of Christ. He was valued at what? 30 pieces of silver? I mean, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at male and female. And you're not going to get away with casting off the righteous daughters anymore. You have done it for 2,000 years. 6,000 years you have done it and got away with it. You treat us like we're your inferior, like we're a rib hanging off the body. She was the spirit given in covenant. And that covenant is formed by her receiving a portion of his body. See, she was built. So she builds the government through the words in her mouth given by God, which is called the law of heaven. But she was built from a portion of his body, and he receives the remnant, it says, of her spirit. And that's the cutting of a sacred covenant between a male and a female, a body and a spirit. And you men out there, you women out there, you need to wake up to this. And I say it out of love. I was where you were. And I'll tell you, it is a heavy burden to come out from. It's hard to let the Spirit lead you when you feel that, oh, if I go from what this says, I'm going to burn. This is truth. And the Spirit says, come, let us reason together. If this isn't reasoning out, then it's because you're not listening to the Spirit. So what does it say in Psalm 57, verse 8? It says, awake, my glory. Excuse me. Awake, O lyre and harp. And I will awaken the dawn with my song. Okay. So before I forget here, I want to interject. I forget which chapter it is, but you can Google it. Of Psalm. But David says the way that he broke enigmas was to play his harp. As he thought about certain problems that he couldn't figure out, he would play music. And I have to tell you, when I began to study the scriptures and tried to break some of the, I guess, enigmas that didn't make sense to me, I would just put in music. And you know, the Spirit began to speak really strongly to me that way. I don't let somebody else put words. I just like music, and my spirit soars in the music. My spirit finds a way to worship the Lord without somebody else's words. I don't need somebody else's words. My spirit will put my own words in worship, and it does that through the music. Music just, I love to soar. I love to soar with music. I just love to praise God without somebody else's words. I don't need their words to tell me how to praise my God. I don't. My spirit tells me how to do that. So what does it mean? Really, I'm going to break it down this way. Awake, my spirit, awake, O lyre. So the word for lyre there is not the word that you would expect. It's 5035. And it has the idea of a vessel or a jar. Yeah. So it really means a skin bottle. Starting to think something different here. A jar, a pitcher, a vessel, a vial, a skin bag for liquids. From collapsing when empty, hence a vase. As similar in shape when full. Also a lyre, as having a body of like form. Now that's interesting, because she's saying awaken my body, awaken my vessel. That's what she's saying there. The one that's going to hold this portion of the spirit, she's saying awaken my vessel. Awake my spirit, awake, O vessel, O jar, skin bottle, and my heart, which was the way that David broke enigmas. And I will awaken the dawn. She's saying, I will awaken a new day. The new day with my song, with my doctrine and truth. I'm going to awaken the day. The new day with doctrine and truth. That's what she's saying. So that's a pretty cool verse, I think. So what else do we want to share with you? I know there's other things that was on some of the videos that I keep forgetting to include and put in. Right. Isaiah 37:32 is another one you can look into. It says, for out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant. These are the daughters of Zion. And out of Mount Zion. A band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. And so we discussed this in the Key of David as well. She says to her daughters of Zion, at that time in Micah 2, she says, leave from here. This is not your rest. The sons are rejecting you. The kings are rejecting your word. And she's saying, leave. Leave here. This isn't where your rest is to be found. So that's an interesting correlation as well. Isaiah 4:1, we have the first fruits of the Spirit. Okay, I'm not going to go into that right now. And we'll look at Isaiah 34 verse 8 very quick. For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a time of retribution for Adam's hostility against Zion. And what did he say in one passage? And I meant to write this down, which I probably didn't. He said, razz it, burn it to the ground. It was Adam saying that. It was the fallen Adam saying it, razz it to the ground. He was saying, razz the daughters of Zion to the ground. Get rid of them. You can look that verse up because it is there somewhere. Is it in 57? It may be in Psalm 57 where he says that. Which we just discussed, I think, for a minute with the word Doeg and Edomite. Let me go in here, I'll look. Okay. Let me see here. I can find it. I would suggest going in and reading Psalm 55. In my Bible, it's given the title Betrayed. And you really need to put the spirit of Eve, the rejected spirit of Eve, over the whole thing. Alright? That's what you really need to do. But where does it seems like it's in one of these Psalms of 50s where Adam actually is in view, who says, "Razor to the ground." He wants to get rid of the righteous spirit totally. 57 is a beautiful chapter. Let's read that right briefly. Be merciful unto me, O God, be merciful unto me, for my soul trusteth in thee. This is the righteous spirit, the righteous daughter. Yea, in the shadow of thy wings will I make my refuge, until these calamities be overpast. Verse 2, I will cry unto God, Most High, unto God that performeth all things for me. Verse 3, she shall send from heaven, and save me from the reproach of him that would swallow me up. God shall send forth her mercy and her truth. Verse 4, my soul is among lions. These fallen are also called lions and lionesses. And I lie even among them that are set on fire, even the sons of men, whose teeth are spears and arrows, in their tongues a sharp sword. We speak of the fox too, that Christ, the voice of Christ and Mother Yahweh, is telling this daughter of Zion, these righteous daughters of Zion, catch for us the foxes. That's in Song of Songs, which are akin to these men, whose teeth are spears and arrows, in their tongue a sharp sword. So they lay a snare to entrap these daughters of Zion, and the way that they lay this is through fallen theology. That's the way that they do it, which is this word, and then they preach a fallen theology out of here, even though the true theology is in here. But you have to understand how to go about acquiring that, and of course you can only be shown that through the Spirit. Verse 5, be thou exalted, O God, above the heaven, let thy glory be above all the earth. They have prepared a net for my steps. This is the righteous spirit, this representing the key of David, the government of Christ, God, who will rule on the earth. They have prepared a net for my steps. My soul is bowed down. They have digged a pit before me, into the midst whereof they are fallen themselves. They begin to believe their own lies. Verse 7, my heart is fixed, O God, my heart is fixed. I will sing and give praise. Verse 8, awake up, my glory, awake. So the Lord is prompting her daughters of Zion to awake. Awake, wake up. All right, it's time to wake up now. Verse 8, awake up, my glory, awake, psaltery and harps, I myself will awaken early. Verse 9, I will praise thee, O Lord, among the people, I will sing unto thee among the nations. In verse 10, for thy mercy is great unto the heavens, and thy truth unto the clouds. Verse 11, be thou exalted, O God, above the heavens, let thy glory be above the earth. So it's all there once you understand this whole theology that I've been showing you. So I hope I actually said something that you could pick up on something that might go with something that you're studying. Because, the more I pick up the Word of God, the more the truth is all over the place once you get this theology down quite firmly, and what the old covenant is, and he's going to actually put in play. It's the old covenant between the whore spirit and fallen Adam. It's not the one that was broken. It's the one that they kept in play, called Old Testament law, which was written by the hand of man, used to exalt man over woman, which is a snare that they used to try to entrap us, that they themselves fall into. So I know once I watch the video, there'll be words that I missed, things that I wanted to say and should have said more clearly. And I'd like to see you go in and to study this theology and not skip through anything, because you're going to miss parts and you're going to get them wrong by saying I said this when I really meant this, because you can do that, because I've done it myself. I hope you'll watch it. I hope you'll pay attention and try to understand it. Let the Spirit lead you, guide you into all truths. I love my brothers and sisters. We need to be working together on this. This is the new covenant being reestablished fully, and how God intended it to go down. So may the Lord bless you, and I hope you have a blessed day.